So I'm thankful for my Savior Jesus, who continues to help me see the truth of who I am, a person who struggles with codependency that stems out of fears, false beliefs, with God's help, He's helping me to overcome them each and every day, and my name is Tanya. Well, hi, everybody. Hopefully we'll get some more enthusiasm going as we get to hear tonight's lesson, because this is actually a fun one. This is like an easy step and principle to live out and implement into our recoveries, but it's also challenging because sometimes we're not aware it's happening, so we don't always notice it. And what I'm referring to is our victories. Sometimes what I've noticed over the years, especially as I sponsored more and more women, is that we're so focused on the problems that we're dealing with that we didn't even realize we responded differently to what happened than what we've done in the past. And so we got to pay attention to our actions. We got to be aware, because they're going to tell us if we're still the same or if we're being changed through this process. And that is why we have a lesson specifically dedicated to this, and it's to be able to understand the importance of noticing and appreciating the victories we have as we work our recoveries here in the CR program. As a matter of fact, did you guys know that you all had a victory today? Yes, you did. I heard one yes out there, one resounding yes. And you're probably wondering, how do I know that, right? You're probably having all kinds of thoughts cross your mind, like, is Tanya a stalker? And has she been following me around or sending her big, huge drone to watch and take video of me? Well, that kind of stuff would be fun if I had the time for it. So I don't. So that's not it, people. Even though you may think strange things about me, that's not what's happening. But I can tell you all with full confidence, you had a victory, because I am seeing you here tonight. I see all your eyeballs here tonight, and that's a victory. Whether it's your first time, days or months into the program or years in the program, every time we come through the doors, that's a victory in our recovery, that we made a choice to work on ourselves and work on our walk with God, to come here and through this program, take advantage of this opportunity to do so. So I want to start a chant. I'm going to say, who all had a victory tonight? And you guys are all going to say, we did. So, who all had a victory tonight?
We did.
Who all had a victory tonight?
We did.
Now that's your first fill in the blank. Everybody should know that answer at the top of your bulletin there. So fill that in. And if you didn't happen to pick up a bulletin, they're on the back table there, so you can take notes if you want as we go through tonight's lesson. But the one other thing I wanted to share about victories is it's important to share them. And another way we do share our victories are with our testimonies. We have them every other week here in CR. It's a big part of the process in the program here. And sometimes they're live from people from our own CR group, and sometimes they're video if we don't have anybody that's recently gone through a 12-step to do theirs. But the next two testimonies I have scheduled are live testimonies, so you definitely want to be here to see them. They're all great, whether they're video or live, but it's really nice when it's live and you can feel like you can see and touch that person and being present with them in the room. But the importance of the victories being shared in those testimonies is to encourage us, it's to inspire us and remind us that with God, changes are possible and that He can help us. And we're not alone in our pain, because a lot of times we can feel like we're alone and we're the only one struggling, or we're the only one going through what we're going through. And the truth is, that's why it's so important to hear those testimonies every other week, to remind us that we're not. So we're going to start it off tonight with a victory, and we're going to jump in now to going over our Principle 5 and Step 6 and 7, which we're wrapping up. This is the last lesson to go with those. Then we're going to be moving on to Principle 6 2 weeks from now. So Principle 5, voluntarily submit to every change God wants to make in my life and humbly ask Him to remove my character defects. Happy are those whose greatest desire is to do what God requires, Matthew 5:6. Then there's Step 6. We were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Corresponds with the verse, James 4:10, humble yourselves before the Lord, and He will lift you up. And Step 7, we humbly ask Him to remove all our shortcomings. Goes along with the verse, 1 John 1:9. If we confess our sins, He is faithful and just and will forgive us our sins and purify us from all unrighteousness. So tonight, as we get into the acronym, but the main thing we're going to be going over is, why is it important to share our victories? Why is it important not only to share them, but identify them? And that's what we're going to go over, is each one that goes with our acronym. And Digger, thank you for making sure I got the 9-letter acronym. I know you like the 4-letter one. So one day, maybe I should have come up, took a chip for that. But anyway, so we're going to start off with the first letter of acronym, V, which is for value small changes. Value small changes. It's your first fill in there. So since starting CR, many of you that have been coming here for a while have found great victories over certain areas of your life. Now, no one is saying you're done or you're perfect, but hopefully you have noticed some changes, even if they're small, because victory can mean different things to different people. You know, some of you have been maintaining sobriety and have found freedom in an area that was previously holding you captive. Maybe your reactions are changing and you're no longer flying off the handle or responding negatively to every situation. It might be that you're just now able to establish clear boundaries with certain people in your life, or maybe you're learning how to say no and not be a people pleaser. And there's so many other ways to have victories and experience them though in here. But one of the things that can get us stuck in our recovery is forgetting or not noticing those small, steady changes that we've been making. We need to notice these changes that God is doing in us in order for us to value them. Another reason why we need to notice the small changes is that is how God shows us we're growing and we're changing. 2 Peter, chapter 1, verses 5 through 7, for this very reason, make every effort to add to your faith goodness, and to goodness knowledge, and to knowledge self-control, to self-control perseverance, and to perseverance godliness, and to godliness mutual affection, and to mutual affection love. This process, if we will apply it, is going to help us grow in our walks with God if we'll practice applying and living out the principles and steps we're learning about in here as we come and participate in the CR program. Now, the next letter in our acronym is I. Identify what needs attention next. Now, sometimes they're obvious, like this poor baby kitten stuck in the blinds. Sometimes our problems are painful and we're just super obvious to us what we need to work on, right? But sometimes they are not. And a lot of times that happens usually after we've worked on our major issue that drove us to come to CR, the major pain that was hurting us or causing pain in our life. So a lot of times when we deal with that, we then start realizing maybe there are some other things, but they're not as easy to notice. And that's why it's so important to repeat the process here in CR of doing the 12 steps. You got to keep doing multiple 12 steps. You got to continue to use your moral inventory sheets anytime you're struggling to help you sort out what is happening and look for troublesome patterns that are beginning to show up. Sometimes what happens when we're working our recoveries is and I should say, and this is another reason why it's important to do our inventory sheets, because one of the things we might discover is that we trade one compulsive behavior or addiction for another unhealthy compulsive behavior or addiction. So if we're using those inventory sheets, we can kind of see, oh, I see I just traded another bad habit for another bad habit instead of getting rid of the old bad habit and replacing it with a new good habit. So it's important to do those things so we can continue to work on identifying those things. In Psalm 25, 4 through 5, it says, show me your ways, Lord, teach me your paths. Guide me in your truth and teach me, for you are God, my Savior, and my hope is in you all day long. And I think it's great to know when we're working on recoveries in CR, we have to be truthful and honest with ourselves about what we need to work on. And God loves to guide us into the truth and teach us what we need to work on if we'll ask. I know another tool that God has used to help guide me to discover other areas I need to work on were the information pamphlets in the lobby. I brought one up here tonight just to kind of show you what they look like. They're labeled by topics. This one says codependency. I feel like this was a pamphlet written about me and my life. And on the inside, on the right side here, it lists all the different ways a codependent person will act out, all the different things that we might do. And this is not all comprehensive. This is just some basic, most common ones, I would say. And then this talks about what our life can look like if we change and address our codependent behaviors. Well, if you never got one of these, you need to get one. If you're struggling on how to identify something to work on, pick up as many of these based off the topics that fit your life and what you're dealing with. Take them home. Open them up. I always take a highlighter and I'm like, yeah, I do that. Yep, I do that. Yep, I do that. I always find lots on this codependency list that are me and ways that I've acted out. And I will start praying over them. And I'll start asking the Lord, which one should I work on now? And I pick one or two, and those are what I start working on. Do not pick more than that. You'll be overwhelmed. You won't make much progress. So keep it to one or two, what you feel like it's what God's leading you to work on next. And so that will really help you identify it. And if you do all these things and you're still not sure what to work on, I have one last surefire way you can figure it out. And that is if you know somebody who knows you really well, which we all probably have at least one person in our life who knows us really well, call them up and ask them what they think you should work on. Because I have a feeling they're going to have lots of suggestions. Okay, so keep thinking and looking at what should you identify and work on next. So the next letter in our acronym is C, for celebrate what God has done in our lives. Have you ever noticed that after a sporting event that there's always one side of the stadium where people are cheering for the winners and not for the losers? I witnessed that at all my grandson's games. I can't miss it when I'm watching Dave watch all his sports. Now, our victories here in CR are a little bit different. I mean, we're not in a competition to see who breaks down and sins first. But what we should be doing is getting excited for each other when we share about the positive changes we're making. We need to do this in our share groups. We need to share about those victories of what's happening in our lives in there and in our testimonies when we give those, because they are way more powerful than we realize. We never know somebody that we might be encouraging that day because of the victories we're experiencing, the hope we might be giving to somebody because they heard about how God's working and helping us in an area that we're struggling with. It's a big deal, and it's worth getting excited about when we notice new changes, like when we react more positively under stress, when we stop and prayed instead of acting out, when we reached out and told someone else that we're about to stumble. That's a huge victory. And when we set boundaries with people that are toxic in our life, and when we don't reach for the food, drugs, or alcohol to comfort ourselves or numb our pain. And those are just a few, and there's so many other victories many of you are having in here. So we need to celebrate it with a little victory dance. But first, I think I need to teach you what a victory dance looks like, so check this out.
Can't touch us!
I can't. I got to pick on you. I can't help myself. And you know why I love that that video? Besides, I crack up every time I watch it. And the reason why we need to do a victory dance and why we need to celebrate is Proverbs 17:22. It says, "A cheerful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up the bones." And sometimes we need that lifting up. It's a way to celebrate that helps us to have that cheerful heart. You may not want to put on MC Hammer pants and do a disco dance, but do something that makes you smile and puts a smile on your face. God says a cheerful heart is the best medicine for our crushed spirit. So make sure you do things to help yourself have a cheerful heart. But also we need to remember when people are sharing their victories, whether it's in their testimonies or in the share group, if they encouraged you and you tell them that afterwards, not during, because there's no crosstalk, right? But afterwards, you can encourage somebody. You may help give them a cheerful heart that night because of what they shared, not even realizing it helped you or encouraged you. So be sure to remember to use your words too. It's also why our program is called Celebrate Recovery. It's not addicts forever or codependent for life, but we are finding freedom from our troubling behaviors that plague us. And so we need to remember to celebrate our recovery as we're experiencing it. The next letter in our acronym is T. Tell someone else about our victory. And the best way to tell others about your victories, like I've already been mentioning, is either in share groups or when you do your testimony. And then after you've grown in your confidence, after you've grown comfortable in the progress you make and what you've been learning and what God's been teaching you and how he's been changing you, and if you're comfortable, then you take those victories and you start sharing it with people outside of CR. You start sharing it with your coworkers or your friends or your family and tell them what God's been doing in your life here when you're ready. He doesn't want to waste our pain, and I believe he will use it if we will tell others about what he's helping us accomplish in this program. You know, if you've been coming a while, you've been hearing my story about my journey, how I've come to CR. Our youngest daughter, who was in high school, was diagnosed with schizophrenia and was out of control. And after taking her to a psychiatrist for 3 years during her high school years, her refusing to take meds or cooperate with the process, the doctor told me to finally stop bringing her in. And that's the day when I hit bottom. I had isolated myself during those 3 years, attempting to fix her, rescue, and control her. And I had nothing left to try, and I was filled with anger, with rage, with sadness, and disappointment. I was ready to numb my pain, but decided to try CR. We had just started this program. I'd only been here at our church for 6 months, and I wasn't for sure what it was, what it meant, or how it would help me. And quite honestly, I was skeptical if it could. But I really didn't know what else to do, and I'm thankful I came. Now, I have to say, this program is not an overnight solution. But if we'll continue to come back and listen to the lessons and the testimonies and express our struggles and our victories and the pain that we're going through in our share groups, and we join a 12-step when they're open, God's going to use that time that we invest to help make changes in our life that we never thought could happen before. For the past 11 years, God has been helping me to learn, and through the CR program, how to set boundaries and stick with them with my daughter, and how to surrender the people in my life that I can't control. And those are huge victories for me. Another thing that made coming to CR so hard for me for so long was my fears. I had grown up with the fear of rejection and fear of what others would think of me for many years, that in the past, when someone did something I didn't like, I would tell my poor husband to go deal with it. I would give him explicit instructions and tell him exactly how to handle it and exactly what to say and exact timing when he should do it. And then when he messed it up and it didn't go as planned, I would get mad at him. Yes, your CR leader is very messed up. So thankfully, though, with God's help, he's been slowly helping me overcome my fears to address and confront others in love. It's still not something I love to do, but it has been a victory that I haven't had to ask him for so many years to do my confrontations for me anymore. In 2 Corinthians 12:9 and 10, it says, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me." Pre-CR, because of my fears, I wouldn't talk about my daughter and what I was going through with her at home here at the church. I thought all the poor choices I was making to try to fix, control her, and rescue her would make others think poorly of me. And my out-of-control emotions, I thought if I spoke about those, then everyone would think I wasn't a Christ follower. But I decided I needed to embrace this verse and trust the truth spoken in it that I just read from 2 Corinthians. I decided if others thought poorly of me because of my weaknesses, then that was their problem. I wanted God's help more than I desired their approval any longer. But for this to begin, I realized I had to own my faults and how I was living out of them, because that was the only way God could begin the process to change me. Now, the next letter in the one is O, for one day at a time. And just in case you can't make it out, yes, that's a heart and brain image. They are hanging out together, and it's going to make sense in a moment, and you'll see why in a moment. So yes, just in case, I didn't want all your time and attention trying to figure out what those images were. Anyway, once we begin to have victory over our hurts, habits, and hangups, it can become tempting to think we're done and our brokenness is healed. But the truth is, if we don't stay diligent, we can and will fall back into our unhealthy patterns of acting out. This is one of the reasons why when you hear us come up and introduce ourselves, or hear us introduce ourselves in our share groups, we identify ourselves as a believer who struggles with blank. Because this is to remind us we are all one mistake away, one poor choice away from catastrophe and relapse. So to maintain the victories we've found and to see the new victories happening, we got to continue to practice living in the moment one day at a time. Matthew 6:34 says, "Don't be anxious about tomorrow. God will take care of your tomorrow too. Live one day at a time." So it makes me wonder, why do we get so anxious over the unknown of tomorrow? I believe it's because our thoughts in our head get together with our heart and our feelings there, and they have a party. And when they get together, they can wreak havoc on us until what? Until we act out on them. Look at the example on the screen, how they mislead us, right? Thoughts are trying to be analytical and thinking, what should we do? And the heart's saying, hey, let's just go spend more money. That'll take your mind off the stress, right? They cause havoc. Our emotions and our thoughts, they can get us into trouble. And that is why it's so important to live in the moment, because we can break up this party before it leads us to something really stupid. Our emotions are powerful, and they can take us to a bad place if we're not monitoring what's going on with them and our thoughts every single day. I'll be honest when I tell you that yesterday was a very disappointing day for me. As I was already speaking about my youngest daughter, she's actually 27, the one I was speaking earlier with the mental illness. Well, she's been sitting in jail for the last 9 months. She was found incompetent to stand trial. She was sent to a mental hospital where they treated her and put her on medication for about 3 months, and then they sent her back to jail. And then she got released 10 days ago. I haven't heard from her since she got out. And I thought, well, at first, she's probably enjoying her freedom and just getting out and probably running around seeing all her friends and stuff. But after a week's gone by, I thought, I'm kind of wondering, like we got some appointments coming up and we're like, are we still helping her with some of these things? What's going on? So I reached out to her and called her phone, and some strange man answered named Junior, which I don't know if it was his real name, but I'm like, okay, Junior, hi, Junior. I'm like, I'm trying to reach my daughter. And he's like, well, this is my phone. I bought it 3 months ago and it came with this number. And I was like, okay, now I'm starting to worry. I'm like, who's this guy that has her phone? In my mind, he has her phone. I don't know what's going on. So I reached out to her friend that she was supposed to go stay with once she got out. And I got a hold of him yesterday and found out that she was over there. But 5 days into getting out of jail, he caught her doing meth in his bathroom. So sadly, I don't know where she is or what she's doing at this moment. And prior to CR, I should back up. I was really disappointed when I got this news. And the thing that was so disappointing for me was the fact that I was so hopeful those 9 months she had spent in jail would leave an impression that she would be motivated to change when she got out. She was miserable. She hated being in there. And one of the things I've learned over the years I've been in CR is that sometimes when we're living in misery, that's the greatest motivation we have and that we need to change. But sadly, that's not what happened. And I don't know where she is. And prior to CR, I probably would have driven up there, found her, yelled at her, kicked her in the butt, and told her to get it together. But that would just be another codependent defect in me attempting to try and control her with my anger. And then my thoughts ran to my fears for her future, fears she won't have a long life due to her mental illness or drug use. And it's so easy for me to want to be codependent again and figure out how to rescue and fix her. But I had to stop myself and ask myself certain questions. What do I have control over today in this situation? I realized I've been through enough pain with her to know that I can't control her. But I can pray for her. And I can express my pain and disappointment with all of you. I feel like telling all of you this helps me to remember where I've been, what I can't control, and what I need to do. And this is why sharing our victories is so important. Because it helps us to remember what God has brought us through, helps us to remember what the truth is, and it helps us to remember what we need to do. So be sure whatever you do, whenever you can, in your share groups, to acknowledge the victories and to surrender the things that you can't control. And I'm sorry, my screen moved. And do that in your victories, and to take it one day at a time. The next letter in our acronym is R for realize. There are battles still to come. The battles against our hurts, habits, and hang-ups is ongoing. We may have found some victories. We'd be foolish to think there won't be more battles to come or ahead in our lives, because we're all just one scooter ride away from crashing and burning if we aren't paying attention to our surroundings, our thoughts, and our actions. When our youngest daughter turned 18, we took her to get her driver's license and her first car. Now, we were nervous because she wanted to move out and she would need a car to get to work. And so we weren't nervous about her moving out and doing all that. We were nervous about her driving and being on the road. But we did it. And within the first 4 months, she was in 4 accidents where she rear-ended people in front of her because she wasn't paying attention. Our insurance went up from a couple $100 a month to over $700 a month because of these accidents. And to make things worse, she totaled her car with the 4th accident. Now, we couldn't afford to not only not pay for her insurance, but we could not pay to get her another vehicle. In our minds, We told her, or we came together and we told her she was going to have to figure out another mode of transportation to get around. Now, in our minds, we were thinking the bus or a bicycle, but she came back to us and said she was going to get a motorcycle. And we weren't a big fan of that plan, but she was an adult living out on her own. So we thought if she's going to do that, let's just do what we can to make sure she gets into classes and learns how to take care of writing and what she needs to prepare for and that kind of stuff. And long story short, you know what ended up happening? She became a better driver. On a motorcycle, both her hands had to be on the handlebars. And this forced her to have to pay attention to everyone around here, plus being where she was at on the road itself. She couldn't pay attention to her radio and her cell phone anymore. Now, I'm still not a huge fan of the motorcycle thing, but I realized for her, driving a car was more of a hindrance because there was too many distractions. She couldn't stay focused on the one thing she needed to be focused on, which was the road. And sometimes that's what happens with us. We get comfortable with how we handle life. We convince ourselves that our addictions and compulsive behaviors are the best ways to handle our problems and pain. But eventually, we'll crash and burn and cause enough damage that we'll realize our way isn't working out so good. And then we'll realize we need to make a change because it's a process. And just like we had to figure out a new way to help my daughter get around, here in CR, we're learning a new way to face and deal with our battles. Philippians 1:6 says, I'm sure that God who began a good work within you will keep right on helping you grow in his grace till his task within you is finally finished on the day when Jesus Christ returns. He says his work is not done until Jesus returns. So that kind of reinforces the point that we have more battles to face, right? It's not going to be over. I can continue to live out of my unhealthy, compulsive behaviors and dysfunctions, or I can seek God for solutions and work my recovery to experience his power changing me. But just a little newsflash side note here, that when I become perfect and you don't see me around here anymore, I'm with Jesus, so don't have to worry about me. That just means I had nothing left to work on. All right, so the last letter in our victory acronym for tonight is Y. You are not alone. I just realized I underlined alone and not you. Oh, I didn't do it on there. I did them. Okay, perfect. That worked out better. Never mind. Pretend I didn't say that. Okay. So sometimes when we're hurting or struggling through life storms, we can feel like we're all alone. We may tell ourselves we're the only ones going through a storm or feel what we're feeling, but the truth is we are not alone. First of all, God is always with us. He tells us in Hebrews 13:5, I will never leave you or forsake you. And not only is God with us, but we have a place to go to share about our storms where we don't have to feel alone. And when we come to CR and we get to hear others share about theirs, it's going to help us realize we're not alone in this world and going through life. And for some reason recently, God keeps bringing to my mind a story when I'm struggling with life's storms. And it comes from the book of Matthew, chapter 8, verses 23 through 27. Now, I'm going to tell you up front, I'm giving you Tanya's paraphrased version. I put the actual NIV version on the screen, but this is my paraphrased version. First, I want to back up a little bit to tell you what was going on. Jesus was traveling around with his disciples, and he was performing all kinds of miracles and healing people, casting out demons, raising people from, or healing people who are about to die and raising others from the dead that had died. So he's been doing a lot with his disciples, hanging out with them. They're witnessing tons of miracles. And they came to a lake. They had to cross over to get to the next town on the other side. So Jesus said, let's get in this boat and let's go travel over there. And when they got in, he fell asleep. And during that time, this big, huge storm came up. And it was so bad, the waves were sweeping over the boat. And the disciples panicked and thought, Jesus doesn't care about what's going on or what's going to happen to them, so we need to wake him up. We need to report the problem and tell him that we're all about to die. And what happened? Jesus got up, he rebuked the winds and the waves, they died down. But the most profound part of this story for me was the painful truth that he spoke to his disciples. He said, you of little faith, why are you so afraid? And that part of the story just spoke to me so much of, he gave such a great example to show me when I'm not living as a woman of faith. When I let my fears consume me in the midst of my storms, and I begin to tell God, he doesn't care or notice me or my problems. I have been working on changing my prayers as I reflect on this story, asking God to help me not panic, to grow in my faith, to not doubt him or his love for me. I also realize that's why I have to keep coming back here to my safe harbor here at CR, where I can weather out life's storms while dealing with all my imperfections. Coming here helps me to remember also I'm not alone and that others are going through their storms as well. And together we can find comfort in knowing that God is with us. He will protect us. He will guide us if we have faith in him. So just remember, we need to celebrate our victories, celebrate that you were here tonight. You don't have to wear MC Hammer pants and do a celebrate dance for your victories, but you can tell others. And if you're inspired when you hear others share, again, in share groups afterwards, or when you hear testimonies afterwards, tell them, let them know. And I did add some questions to your insert. If you want to use that for share group time tonight, feel free. If you have something else that you want to share, that's fine too. But I always like to add some questions that you can use if you're just need some guidance with that. And with that, let's wrap up with the Serenity Prayer. So if everybody will stand.